is basically a drill down into one of those particular areas. In this case, it is the call center or the customer service function, and this is really the detail that makes up the content on the previous slide, but you can actually see here, the different categories, and we use tools such as this with different utilities that have started up these types of programs and are currently looking at the impacts of these types of programs. So you'll see, for example, in the customer service function, if you're going down the smart metering path, the nature of the customer, the call center rep, the nature of that job, they're still answering phone calls, right? The difference between that and the potential of, depending upon your strategy for beyond the meter, ultimately that is a dramatically different change in the nature of that customer service representative's job. So just an example of that. Second example on the next slide is about the distribution field operations. And so this is really the linemen, the field crews, designers, estimators, etc. And an interesting observation, one of the impacts we've recently realized is that, for example, as work is now being designed, in a smart grid situation, as that work is actually being designed, now a designer, an estimator, has to understand the implications around IT because there's much more connectivity in IT infrastructure, and that's very different than we had in the past. So again, just an illustration of the different kind of impacts you'll see between two different kinds of workforces, and again, we would certainly see these as being different as you initiate your different programs. And John, I seem to have some difficulty moving the slide. If you could help me move to the key consideration slide. So just in closing, some questions as you think about starting on these programs. First, do you actually have clarity on that in-state business agenda? Is it focused on driving a shift, a fun shift with the customer, or is it not? Is it more about optimizing how you operate the grid? Secondly, have you identified that long-term, that in-state organizational, that is there going to be governance structure shifts, organizational shifts, and process shifts? Do you actually have a perspective on the new skills and capabilities required, the behaviors as you implement for success? Do you know who's ultimately impacted by these changes and who will influence success of those individuals? So for example, if you have a significant represented workforce, your bargaining unit leadership may need to play a much more significant role in supporting and helping you manage the change process than if your workforce is not significantly represented. And then finally, do you understand the perceptions, the values, the motivations, and expectations of these organizations, which we've found to be quite key as you set up those programs? What are their key concerns? What are their expectations? What do they understand about the programs today? And is that understanding consistent with your specific strategy? And using that as really your baseline set of information will help you, as Brian will cover in the next section, really help you to set up the right program for success over the long term. So with that, I'll turn it back, I believe, over to Jesse for any questions.
On slide 4, you have the change Harvey Ball was referring to, changing impact. Who is the impact to?
So that would be impact to the individuals within that organization, if I understand the question correctly. So what we're talking about, for example, if you look at the slide and you'll look over at customer service, it's the customer service employees when you're implementing the smart metering program as Bernie defined.
And then one of the other questions that we have, and what we'll do is we'll go ahead and launch another one of our quick polls so that people can go ahead and vote on that as we go to the next section. What about distributed energy role in the smart grid, particularly as smart grid has the potential to network locally generated micropower and send it back into the grid? An internet where individuals are empowered to generate, store, and send their own power. How is that affected?
So what you're asking about, what is the impact when you've actually now incorporated distributed generation? Is that, John, the question?
Yep, exactly. Yes.
Okay, great question. And this is actually where we see impacts across the board from, even into the generation function, across, trading, into customer service, et cetera. So if you look at, I don't know if we have that listed. Our assumption is that if you look at the beyond the meter, that's an example of different kind of impacts, and we've included things like distributed generation in that. So you could have customer service representatives now getting questions, for example, from customers now trying to understand what is the implication of installing, let's say, solar panels on their home. The transmission distribution organizations, right? So those are the different kind of impacts we might have seen if you look at that beyond the meter.